Hello, and welcome back to the Velvet Coffin. I'm your host, Vivienne Von Dread, with your daily dread. Let's get into today's story, shall we? Today's story is titled, Do Not Eat the Meat. Let me preface this by saying, I am not a good person. I have robbed, cheated, and lied to keep myself ahead in life, and each sin led me to the next. Well, I did do all of those things. Now I mostly just sit in my cell writing and trying to find repentance. You see, not being a good person was the death of me. I had gone out with friends one night on a joyride. We got plastered and stole my neighbor's Chevy Equinox while laughing like madmen. Not even 5 miles down the road, the flashing red and blue lights of a police cruiser came speeding up right onto our bumper. Of course, being the idiot I was, I chose to run. I pushed the pedal all the way to the floor and watched the speedometer climb as I raced past lines of vehicles. The cop caught up, though, and with one tap of the push bumper, the car began to swerve wildly. I lost control as we skidded across the lanes and through the dividers. We barreled into oncoming traffic and, boom, head-on collision with a black SUV at a combined speed of 160 miles per hour. Darkness followed as I floated through a dreamlike state. I awoke in a blindingly white room at what appeared to be a dinner table. It was covered in plates of raw, rotting meat, being swarmed with flies and squirming with maggots. Across the table sat a woman. She glowed with divine elegance as she stared at me with motherly love in her eyes. "Hello," she inquired. Hi," I replied nervously. I followed up by asking her if I was in heaven, to which she laughed and replied, "Oh no, dear. This is quite far from heaven." She looked down at the table, sifting through the plates before selecting one. A decaying pig leg lay atop the plate, bloody and dripping with disgusting green juices. I watched with utter disgust as the woman picked up a fork and knife and began sawing away at the bloated meat. She then stuck the first bite in her mouth and moaned delightfully. I wanted to puke on the table, but stifled the urge, instead asking what in God's name she was doing. "You've done some bad things. Isn't that right, Donovan?" She choked out, her mouth full of rotting meat and blood. "I mean, you took out a family as you died." The stench of the room burned my nostrils, and sweat beads began to form on my face. I didn't even know how to answer. I just sat there, wallowing in my shame. 20 years old and already so much blood on your hands. So many lies to keep my table set. She had somehow managed to already scarf down the entire pig leg before me, and her hands jerked violently across the table as she grabbed the next plate. A bloated cow tongue, moist and slimy, reeking of the foulest odor you could imagine. She sliced at it with her knife, and blood and pus spurted out from the gash and onto the woman's white blouse. She paid no mind, though, and just continued eating, devouring the tongue in only a few bites like it was nothing. "Let's talk about where you said you were going when you decided to go on your little joy ride with your buddies," she exclaimed. "What was it?" "Oh, yes. If I recall, you told your own mother you were going to the homeless shelter to donate food and blankets, correct? Just before you made off with your friends to steal your poor neighbor's car?" I had done that. I had very much so told her that, so she'd let me leave the house after sundown. I couldn't bring myself to answer and instead looked down to the floor red-faced. "Lies, lies, lies. Oh, such delicious lies," she sang, slurping down a long string of intestines. "And that was only one of your many incidents, isn't that right, child? We have sins here to feast on for an eternity," she boomed. Lies, theft, greed, it's all here on this table. She grabbed a new plate. This one, a kidney, spongy and black. Flies followed the chunk of meat on her fork into her mouth, and she chewed rapidly as bits of blood and mucus flew from her lips. I was completely speechless. Yeah, I wouldn't talk either if I were you. Hey, let me ask you something. Why did you drink so much? I mean, you knew the legal drinking age was 21, yet here you are, 19 years old, and shaking with withdrawals. I stuttered. Look, I'm sorry, okay? I made mistakes, and I'm sorry. I don't know why I drank so much. I was stupid. No, Donovan. Staying up past 12 on a school night is stupid. Your actions led to the demise of you and 8 other people. Shall we ask them what they think? With a wave of her hand, my friends appeared along with the family I had hit, watching us from the sides of the table. They were mangled. With their limbs bending at awkward angles. My friend Matthew was nearly beheaded, and blood spurted out from the gaping wound in his neck. Daniel's skull had been crushed, and an eye dangled out from its socket. My other 2 friends looked as though their necks had been snapped, and bones poked from beneath the surface of their skin. Most abhorrent, though, was the son of the family. His jaw dangled limply from its hinge, and his entire bottom row of teeth had been completely shattered. "Does this look like stupidity to you?" the woman asked, condescendingly. I could no longer hold it down, and vomit rose from my stomach and into my throat. I opened my mouth, and thousands of maggots began spilling out all over the table. "Please," I begged, "please, forgive me, I will change. Please just let me change." My face was beet red and drenched in sweat. Snot dripped from my nostril, and my eyes were soaked with tears. "Oh, believe me, Donovan, you're going back. But first, you and I are going to enjoy this meal I've prepared for us. You've hardly even touched your food." Seemingly out of thin air, a fork and knife appeared in my hand, and against my will I began cutting into a festering gallbladder. I fought to keep the fork from my mouth, but the force that overwhelmed me was too strong, and more rotten vomit came pouring from my mouth the instant the chunk of meat touched my tongue. The woman clasped her hands together in amusement before returning to her meal. Together we sat, eating rotten meat for what felt like an eternity as my decaying victims looked on. It came down to the last 2 plates. A putrid-looking brain, leaking juices that overflowed on the plate, and a blackened heart crawling with insects and reeking of death. The woman slid the plate with the brain over to me, and when I cut into it, it squelched and spurted. I could no longer even throw up, and instead forced the organ down my throat 1 bite at a time before my body made me lift the plate to my mouth and drink the juices. Once the plate was clean, the woman roared with excitement. "Now, Donovan," she said with a hand on my shoulder, "I want you to remember this when you're in that cell. And I want you to think about how much worse it can and will be if this doesn't end today." With a snap, I was back in my body, writhing in pain and upside down. Gasoline dripped onto the ceiling, and firefighters rushed to pull me from the burning wreckage. Both cars were completely destroyed and sprawled out across the highway. I was placed in the back of an ambulance, where I was then handcuffed and accompanied by first responding officers. I spent weeks recovering, handcuffed to the hospital bed, and once I did, my trial moved forward. The court showed no leniency, nor did I expect them to. My days are now spent in the cell, documenting, reminiscing, and repenting. Let this story be a warning to people. Being bad is not good. Nothing good can come from being bad. Please look after yourselves and others. Don't make the same mistake I did. Do not eat the meat. Ooh, spooky and gross. Once again, our story today was titled Do Not Eat the Meat by Reddit user Donovan221. Thank you, Donovan, for sharing another story with the Velvet Coffin. And thank you for visiting us once again. I'm your host, Vivienne Von Dread, with your Daily Dread. Now, goodbye. Get out. See you tomorrow.